I saw the rent sign outside, and I wanted to take a look around.
Yes, go right ahead and look.
Although the interior was being renovated, the work crew allowed Karen to see the house. The kitchen was just big enough to cook for her large family.
Do you know how many bedrooms this house has?
There are 2 upstairs.
The more she saw of the house, the more she envisioned her family living there.
But there are some downstairs you could use as bedrooms.
Thanks.
Most importantly, it was only minutes from the hospital where Paul was being treated for cancer.
I looked around the house. It had very large rooms. It was perfect.
Do you know where the stairs to the basement are?
Oh, it's right there.
Thanks.
She hoped the basement could be converted into additional bedrooms for her oldest sons.
I thought that it was going to be nice when they finished it. I thought it would be great for the boys to share downstairs. Everyone was crazy about the idea. Getting Paul close to the hospital and his doctors was the most important overriding thought in the entire family's mind. So they were happy to be moving to Connecticut.
Karen and her husband, Ed, moved a few things into their new home. It was Ed's first look at the place.
The living room, dining room, kitchen, 2 bedrooms upstairs, closet in here.
Karen was eager to inspect the basement now that it was clean. There was at least one room in the back she hadn't seen. The room held clues to the home's past.
Stop.
A saw and a lathe.
What do they use all these things for?
Tools all the time. I've never seen anything like this thing. Do you know what this is?
No.
This is bizarre. Chemicals, jars. What the?
What's in there?
Freezer of some type.
At that point, I realized that it was a funeral home.
And we cannot live in this house.
I thought, how can we live in this place? How can I bring my children into this home? What kind of environment is this going to be if they see this stuff?
Ed attempted to calm his wife.
I don't want the
He told her even if it had been a funeral home, no one had died there. The couple now realized why the rent was so inexpensive. They had no choice but to move in.
We've used every dime of money that we had saved on Paul's illness and on renting this house and moving down here. We had no place else to go.
Karen and Ed agreed. They would hide the home's morbid past from their children. But as they passed the cemetery next to their new home, Karen realized that was going to be very difficult. The embalming equipment from the basement, but left the freezer and other large items that might be useful to the family. Karen hoped Paul would warm to his new surroundings.
He was walking from room to room. He was moving slow and he was very weak and pale. I had brought him so I could mop the kitchen floor before we brought in all the furniture.
But as Karen began to mop, there was a sign all was not well in the house. It was a sign that could not be ignored.
What's wrong with this floor?
I started getting nervous that I was ruining the floor.
As Paul descended the basement stairs for the first time, he felt an icy chill in the air. He believed he was being watched by someone.
Mom, we need to leave this place.
What?
It's evil.
He was scared to death.
I want to go home.
He told me of a voice that called him by name. And I thought this was an inner voice. I didn't believe he was really hearing someone call his name. And I'm looking at my boy, my sick boy, thinking, he is so close to death. that he can sense that this was a funeral home. I didn't know what to think.
Get your treatment so that you can get better. We have to be here.
In difficult times, the Parker family often turned to the Catholic Church for spiritual guidance.
I took Paul to the priest that had married my husband and myself and asked him to do a healing on Paul.
Show your mercy.
Well, he put his hands on him and he prayed.
Your ills. We ask this through our Lord Jesus, who healed those who believed. Amen.
Paul's siblings moved into the house, including his sister Connie and his youngest brother Mark.
This is big. This is big.
You have to get a tour. There's a lot of room.
Bobby was Paul's closest brother, only 2 years younger than him.
The house was huge, just about big enough to get lost in.
Somehow, Paul discovered the home's secret past.
Within 10 minutes of me coming in the house, my brother told me it was a funeral home, and he took me around and he gave me the grand tour of the basement area.
Oh, yeah.
Neat, huh?
Yeah.
Get up on it. I'll be a ride.
All right.
My brother actually had me lay down on the gurney in the morgue without telling me what it was.
Kind of like at the hospital, huh?
Yeah.
It did freak me out real bad, but I didn't want to run because my older brother, you know, I had to look tough around my older brother. It was pretty creepy. It scared me pretty bad.
Now you turn on that.
And as the days went on, things seemed to get even more strange.
You turn on that, yep, and you say, I'm gonna go over there and talk. And you say, I'll talk with you. Mommy, there's a woman in my room.
She told me that there was a woman looking at her in her bedroom. What I noticed the most was she grabbed hold of me and wrapped a hold of me, and as I touched her, she was trembling all over. And I mean trembling. And she wasn't a skittish child, so it was very unusual to feel her trembling.
There's something there.
Karen's inspection of the room showed nothing out of the ordinary.
Connie, there's nothing here. Looks good. Look, did you close
Yes, there
it?
is, Mama. Mama, there's something. Mama.
There's nobody in there.
There's something, Mama.
Sweetheart, listen here. This is just your brother's putting things in your mind. Come on, go downstairs and help me.
I know that Paul told the other kids that it was a funeral home because that's what brothers and sisters do. They confide in one another. And it really made me angry. I thought for sure the boys were playing tricks on her.
Stop it.
Hey, I just came from your sister who is scared to death because she thinks she saw a ghost. Stop playing tricks on her. She is too young.
Mom, I swear I didn't tell her anything.
But you told me.
Both of you, cut it out.
Mom.
You could see something moving around, and we thought it was shadows at first. But then we got to watching what was going on in there, and it was more like someone's walking around in there. And that's what my brother Paul told me. there was weird things that happened in the house.
Night brought terror to Paul and Bobby Parker in the form of ghostly apparitions.
Losing my mind. I know I set the table, but the dishes weren't there.
Bobby dreaded going into the old morgue alone.
I knew there was something definitely going on in the house because you'd see things and you'd hear things.
Mom, I just heard a voice down in the basement calling for Paul.
Where's the bread?
In the freezer.
Well,
Mom, I don't want to go down there.
I just thought the house was haunted. You'd hear in a really deep, grindy voice. I didn't think I was going crazy. I didn't think my brother was going crazy. I thought it was just something in the house.
I thought, Paul's got you scared to death, hasn't he?
Karen didn't believe the house could be haunted. She thought its macabre past was fueling the children's imaginations.
I didn't believe in ghosts. I believed in the spirit world, but I didn't believe that it could interact with our world. Of course, I didn't hear a voice calling from the freezer.
bread.
And I kind of teased Bobby about it. He was adamant that there was a voice that called Paul.
Karen's husband, Ed, arrived later that morning to spend the weekend.
Look, kids, I know about the stories about the house, okay?
With the kids
Because you
already
moved in
gossiping about the home's
funeral parlor
past,
doesn't mean that it's haunted or there's anything scary here, okay?
Ed and Karen acknowledged they were living in a former funeral home.
It's okay.
But they said it was no reason for the house to be haunted.
That's right. It's just a house. It was a house before it was a funeral parlor. And it's just a house now. That's all.
We saw a fly in the basement, though. We did.
I saw him too.
We did.
You can't argue with two people.
Look, it's a new place, a new environment. Take some time to get used to it. Okay?
Are you done eating?
My husband was pretty much of the same mind I was, that there was nothing real in these stories and that we had to find a way to put a stop to them and get the children to stop being afraid of the house.
His mother thought his mental health was deteriorating.
I didn't believe him, so I wasn't frightened. I was scared for him. I was concerned about his health.
She chose to ignore subtle signs that something evil was lurking in the house.
I noticed these crucifixes were disappearing. Never quite knew where they went.
At night, the Parker children reported seeing ghostly apparitions in a house they knew was a funeral home. They were frustrated when their parents didn't believe them. Paul and Bobby struggled to contain their fears in the face of new sightings.
It looked like they were looking through papers. They were picking objects up, putting objects down, talking amongst each other, and it sounded like four guys whispering, but you could still hear them talking. We didn't say anything.
For Ed and Karen, the middle of the night disturbances were becoming routine.
Okay, fine.
Let's go check it out. No, please, Dad, they're there. Trust us.
Sure they are. Down here.
They were right there.
Yeah,
Where?
by the bookcase. There's nobody
Over here?
They described these men as being in dark clothes or something like that. I went from room to room looking for these
Right in
men.
this corner. I don't see any.
I don't have to tell you, sweetie, there's no one down here.
Ed was determined to prove no one could have gotten inside their house.
So they checked the doors, they checked the windows, and everything was locked up tighter than a drum. There was no way anybody could have gotten in the house. It was just a dream.
There were no tracks in the snow or signs that anyone had been near the house.
But he was there. You have to believe us, he was there. No, Dad.
Dad, he was there.
Let's go to bed now. Let's go.
They were here, all of them.
Ed was weary of being woken up on a nightly basis.
It's been a long night, okay? Long night. Get to bed, both of you, now.
It was upsetting that they didn't believe us.
Bed, now. Karen,
You don't understand.
get to bed, now. Now.
Karen was convinced Paul's medication was the cause of his hallucinations, and that he was influencing the younger children to see things as well.
The next office visit I had with his oncologist, I asked him about it. He said that there was no chance of him having hallucinations or delusions with the medication he was on.
It's not a psychotropic drug. You have to look somewhere else for that.
The doctor's answer was troubling. If it was the medication's fault, Paul's behavior would make sense. But now it seemed Paul might have a psychological problem in addition to his cancer. The possibility of yet another medical crisis was too much for Karen and Ed to bear.
At that point, him and I both were working all the hours we possibly could, and the medical bills was staggering. I mean, there was 2-inch stack every day in the mail.
Ed was stunned by the latest electric bill. He quickly isolated the cause. The children were keeping all of their lights on when they slept at night. Paul's ghost stories caused Ed and Karen to lose sleep. Now they were costing the family money it didn't have.
See what you done to your brother?
Ed removed all but one of the light bulbs. The lights that used to bring them relief now brought them new horror.
And there was my sister Connie. And she was flipping the light switch on and off. And lights were coming on and off, even though there was no bulbs in it. And then she ran up the stairs, and I ran up after her.
Bobby, what are you doing?
Mom, where's Carmen?
She's upstairs asleep. What are you doing?
What are you talking about? She just came up the stairs. I was chasing her, Mom.
I tucked her in 2 hours.
She was in our room. She was in our room and she...
You can go check for yourself. I put her to bed. Your father and I...
And my mother said she didn't just come down to your room. She's been in there for 2 or 3 hours. And I didn't believe my mother, of course. So I walked back there and I looked. And she was sound asleep in her bed. What really scared me was because it took a form of someone in my family. And it was really unnerving.
Paul quit trying to convince his parents that something diabolical was lurking in the house. He decided to confront the voice that haunted him.
Paul, your lab is normal. You're in remission as it stands right now.
While Paul seemed to be suffering from mental problems, his physical condition improved.
I'd just like to see him back in about 3 months. You can make the appointment.
But Paul seemed to take no joy in the astounding news.
Great. All right, honey, you ready?
With Paul's cancer no longer a crisis, Karen took in her first house guest since moving into their new home. Her 17-year-old niece, Teresa.
My mother and my father were divorcing. Just didn't work out too well, so my aunt called and invited me to come be with them. We were pretty close.
Oh my goodness. Hey, Teresa. What's up, buddy? How you doing? Where's Mark?
Teresa noticed that someone was missing.
You look great. I love you.
How was the trip?
Good.
Good trip?
Where's Paul?
Connie, you want to help
Let
me
me take your
put
coat.
the luggage upstairs?
Okay.
You boys pick up those toys in that room, okay?
Paul and Teresa had always been good friends. Karen hoped Teresa's presence would help Paul be a part of the family again.
Paul was a lot different from what I had remembered. He went from this really sweet kid to being angry. It was almost like he had this meanness coming over him slowly and was not a happy person.
While Teresa was surprised by the changes in Paul's appearance and disposition, what he was saying concerned her the most.
Paul would tell me about how he had heard things and seen things, and Aunt Karen and Uncle Ed did not believe him.
Okay. To my own flesh and blood.
He felt alone. He said it never got better, it got worse. And it went from, you know, I heard this thing scratching on my door to this thing won't leave me alone. He's at my bed every night and he's talking to me. He would talk bad about his mom and dad. And would talk bad about his little brothers and sisters, and it would tell him to go do bad things to them. The look in his eyes that you would see, it didn't seem like it was him. He was just not himself.
I know what the problem is in this house. You are.
You're so blind you don't even know what's going on in this house.
I know what's going on.
How can you say that?
It was like suddenly hate was a part of the household.
Here after time. You don't even know what's going on. How can you
Doesn't matter. It's my house and you're going to live by my rules. You understand what I'm saying?
They were arguing at this point about Paul's behavior.
Everybody's seen it too. You're the only one that doesn't know what's going on.
You've got them so scared they're not going to say anything else.
You can't even tell me.
You walk away from me.
Because he was just getting out of control. This demon got stronger and meaner to him every time it came to him. Paul got to where he couldn't leave the room. He couldn't talk back. This demon would tell him, go upstairs and do something bad.
Only one person could have exposed Paul's innermost secrets to his mother. Teresa.
Paul could see these people walking around that were dead and buried. And they were all in our basement. He was told that this demon was going to do things to him if he didn't listen and do what he was told. Our relationship started to disintegrate at that time. I didn't trust him anymore.
Bobby and Teresa were afraid of him. His temper was flaring and he was unpredictable.
I felt uncomfortable in the house and I felt there were bad things in there and I needed something. So she gave me rosary beads. I slept with it as a necklace, as strength, because when you held these rosary beads, there was so much comfort in them.
The incident prompted Karen to take Paul to a psychiatrist.
We'll need him to come back in for some more tests or whatever like that.
The doctor was concerned about Paul's behavior and his writings.
You know, so,
he suggested further counseling and therapy. Karen agreed.
4 or 5 more times, you know, we can go ahead and get this settled or whatever like that. And so,
But it was already too late.
Paul was removed from the house because of how violent he became. And everybody thought he went crazy because he was off the deep end. And then an ambulance showed up, and he started crying and saying, well, where am I going? Where are they taking me? And they put him in an ambulance and took him away.
Get him off of me!
Here you go, sweetie. Let's go. I want you to go back to bed. Everything's gonna be okay, all right? I promise. Don't worry, okay? Go to bed. We'll be home soon.
Ed and Karen followed the ambulance to the hospital. Paul issued an ominous warning to his parents.
Now that I'm out of the house, they'll be after you.
He warned me that things would get worse now. It made me kind of afraid that my son's mind was never going to be normal again.
This time, they couldn't deny what they had seen with their own eyes.
It was a horrible situation. It was just so frightening. I didn't think I was going to get out.
All I kept thinking is, this is not happening. This is in my mind, you know, I'm going crazy.
Whatever attacked Karen and Teresa seemed to have followed Ed to work.